Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to the Catchment Data and Evidence Forum 2020. I'm Lucy Butler and I'm here with my colleagues from the CaBA technical support team, Michelle, Dave, Catherine and Annika, and we'll be running the session today. But as you'll see in a moment, we've had support from lots of other people through CaBA to pull this 3-day programme together. We're also joined on screen by Professor Alex Inman from Exeter Uni, who we're very grateful to for presenting our keynote and going to provide some reflections and insights throughout the day. So we've had to come online this year, but we don't want that to limit our interaction. So please make the most of the Q&A function to ask questions. All our talks are recorded, so speakers can interact and type answers to the questions as the talks are playing. And you can also comment on questions and upvote those that you think are most important and interesting. There's a few speakers who can't join us today, but we'll take a note of any questions asked and feedback to them after the event. So we're now going to kick off with a bit more introduction from myself and Dave, just to explain a little bit more about what to expect from today.
Okay, so welcome again everyone. And just before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to the team you can see on the screen who've helped organise and pull this 3-day online forum and webinar programme together. It's been a real joint effort across CaBA and we hope you all enjoy the programme over the next few days. The forum is supported again this year by the Water Co-Governance WaterCog project, which is working with partners in the EU North Sea region to enable more effective stakeholder and community participation in water management. And we're joined today by partners from Denmark, the Netherlands and Yorkshire. We're also supported by the Wholescape Approach to Marine Management, or WAM project, which aims to support a more collaborative approach between CaBA and coastal partnerships. And you'll be hearing a couple of talks later today about citizen science initiatives in the Solent and in the Wyre Estuary, and also hearing about the new CaBA Coastal Data Package. So the Catchment Data and Evidence Forum came out of the Catchment Data User Group, which is one of the working groups that's been supporting the catchment-based approach since 2013. It's a multi-sectoral group, including people from government, NGOs, industry, academia, consultancies, who are all using data and evidence in collaborative catchment management. And the group hold regular update telecons throughout the year. This is our 3rd annual forum, and as in previous years, we'll be producing a summary document highlighting outcomes from the day and including results from the interactive voting sessions. These have been really helpful documents to share with DEFRA and government to show where the CaBA data and evidence community think the priorities are, and also to guide the work of CDUG over the year. We'll also be sharing the presentations, discussions and Q&A from today, so if you have any issues with anything being shared online, please let us know. Last year we focused on the use and collection of CaBA data and discussed how far local data gathering should be organised at a national level. We discussed some of the challenges, particularly around the frustration of too many apps and platforms, but we also agreed there were substantial opportunities and that we should move forward with developing a proposal for a national catchment monitoring cooperative, and we started to plan out some of the first steps. And we'll be focusing on how this has developed in more detail this afternoon.
Thanks, Lucy. Each year in the introduction, we like to remind ourselves of the 3 aims of the forum, just to keep us on track. So the first aim is to identify the barriers and opportunities for the wider CaBA data and evidence community to support the delivery of the 25-year environment plan. Second aim is to provide a totally inclusive national forum for the catchment data and evidence community to exchange knowledge and expertise and increase the network of technical experts available to CaBA partnerships. Today is all about knowledge exchange. We have 20+ lightning talks and 4 longer ones with over 60 different organisations registered to join and take part. The final aim is to incorporate the ideas and expertise of the wider community in the co-design of key evidence sharing infrastructure to support the 25-year environment plan. You'll be doing this after lunch by sharing your views on the development of the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. What to expect? Well, our focus this year is on building social capital and engagement of communities through data and evidence. This is an area that I've not paid enough attention to, always believing that if you give folk the evidence, they'll make good decisions. It turns out this may not be true, and we're very happy to have Professor Alex Inman from Exeter University to start us off today and hopefully challenge some of our thinking. It's a bit different this year. We lose the face-to-face networking and chat, but replace it with a virtual version, or as near as we can get. We keep the discussion, although they'll be shorter, and there'll be voting, of course. This year, we've also added in webinars to allow us to go into more depth on key areas. Lightning talks. We've done these every year, and they've always been very popular. They provide a shop window for what's going on in the widest cross-section of catchment, coastal and nature recovery network community and allow a bit of networking. So a quick explanation of how you can interact today, and please do. You can use the Q&A function to ask questions. We'll try and get the panelists to answer as many questions as possible and make sure we provide the answers to all questions after the event. You can use the chat function to network and talk to each other. We found this really important part of a recent conference, so make use of it if you'd like to. And as ever, we'll be having voting. This is one of the most important components of the forum. We'll be asking questions and the voting form will come up on your screen. It's pretty intuitive and it really helps to capture ideas and information from everyone on an equal footing. For any of you on social media, we'll be using the hashtag CDOGForum 2020. So this year we have 4 sessions. We start with making data more collaborative, inclusive and accessible, then go on to engaging communities to influence and change, then an update on the monitoring from the Environment Agency, and then finish off with monitoring and citizen science. And without further delay, I'd like to end the intro and hand over to Professor Alex Inman to give us an insight into how we use data in our decision-making process. Thanks, Alex. That was a really good, useful start to the day. I've seen that you've answered one question online. The second one from Mark Summers. Have you got a link to the work that you were talking about?
Yeah, I can send all that, no problem.
Okay, grand. We've got another question just come in from Christine Colvin recently. But do you have, oh goodness, do you have any comments on the recent exam fiasco? That's quite a relevant question for you as well.
I could talk about that for hours because my
only 1 minute, okay, Alex. Only 1 minute.
My eldest son was involved in that. What's the specific? Sorry, the specific question around it.
I think do you think the question is about the situation with the A-level marks? How could they have communicated better about the standardisation model and so forth to have got people more sort of confident in its results? Or what mistakes did they make? And then we'll go on to one other question afterwards.
It's a very interesting question. I think. Sorry, I'm getting very bad feedback. I hope that's not the case for everybody. Yeah, thanks for the question. Transparency, I think, in loose terms, having spent the entire weekend myself reading the 316-page technical report that was produced to try and explain the algorithm, it was a difficult thing to communicate, I think, to the general public, but they could have made a better job of it, just communicating the actual methodology much earlier than they did.
I think, Alex, you also said that they refused to take help from experts, so that's part of that kind of transparency, isn't it?
And that was reported widely in the press, and I think, again, aided the distrust from the public. So early communication, I think, would have helped significantly.
Grand. And the second question from Gina: do you feel the process that you were talking about with the farmers could have worked well with Zoom and kind of virtual world that we're currently in?
That's a really good question. Again, my own view is when working with certain typologies of people, farmers in particular, face-to-face communication, in my view, is hugely preferable. You're dealing with a socio-demographic group that quite often struggle with IT. Yeah, in my experience with that particular group, you can't beat face-to-face communication.
Okay, well, I think we've probably come up to the amount of we're on time at the moment. We've got a couple more questions in there, Alex. So if you could answer those at your leisure during the next session, which we're going on to, which is the first session of lightning talks on making data and evidence more collaborative, inclusive and accessible. Carry on posting your questions in the Q&A section. And we're going to start with a slightly longer talk from Barry Hankin, which I think embodies a lot of the features that Alex has been talking about.
My name is Barry Hankin. I'm a visiting researcher at LEC, and I'm involved in the QNFM project to understand the effectiveness of NFM at Lancaster. And I'm involved in task 7, which is on end-user modelling scenarios with the Rivers Trust and Phil Haygarth there. And we've been working with partners to try and come up with some realistic scenarios to model alongside the kind of scenarios that we're testing, the theoretical scenarios, which are more feasible. The aim has been to sort of co-develop with partners these scenarios and refine them until they reflect what people want. So we've done different engagement events, and we've had targeted discussions with CaBA hosts and structured discussions around potential NFM scenarios that were initially derived based on the Environment Agency potential areas for working with natural processes, and then refined down through these different feedback stages. We had a big stakeholder workshop back in January, and we presented the work, we discussed NFM with different presentations and went into the field, and then we had interactive sessions where people fed back on different NFM types and quantities, and then we kind of continually have improved how we've been engaging and co-creating these scenarios. Now it whittled down to 5 scenarios for the which are RT scenarios, these partner scenarios, and you can see them listed there. And in pink are the different comments that came from feedback and so on. So for instance, if we're thinking about storage in RT3, then the intention is to narrow down those by size and only use large ones, which are more effective. And for instance, don't place them on agricultural land with high value. So there's a range of ones there to do with improving infiltration rates on slowly permeable soils, peat restoration, woodland planting, and also there's this combined scenario RT1, which is the more interesting one. Because the intention there was to sort of look back over what's been achieved the last 25 years and project it forwards 25 years into the future, combine the different scenarios, and essentially try and double the rate of implementation over the next 25 years. So that's the aim of that scenario, a kind of let's do better than we've done, and how would that look? So partners also wanted key areas highlighting where the most benefits would be seen in the bottom left there, and that's actually quite difficult without doing the modelling first. But obviously there's a lot of literature and steer from all of the studies that have been done recently across the NERC project, but also earlier papers like the restatement of the effectiveness of NFM in the Dadson review, and we'll use that information to try and refine down our scenarios, as I'll explain. So the top table here is to do with the Rivers Trust analysis of what's been done in the Kent, Eden and Derwent catchments in terms of increased roughness. That might be through tree planting or peat restoration or hedgerows, and then also losses in terms of soil improvement, trying to improve infiltration, and then also storage, which might include scrapes and ponds and runoff interception. And so you can see actually those areas there are in the sort of thousands on average, but if we look at the potential area maps, we're in the millions of metres squared, so we've got a lot of refining down to do, and we did that in a number of ways to come up with this realistic RT1 scenario, and I'll explain those in the next slides. So how do we prioritise? Well, we've used two methods. The first method, we've drawn a mask over the country. Actually, we did this nationally with some work with the CaBA Trust, where we looked at all the flow accumulation areas with catchments smaller than 10 kilometres squared, where properties were at risk of frequent flooding. And you can see that on the right there, you can see what happens as you get these, the pink areas are population at risk of frequent flooding, and those are all within the green zone, which has a flow accumulation of less than 10 kilometres squared, which is the definition of a small catchment. And if we look in the literature, in the restatement, then that's where an FM might be more effective. So that's why we've whittled it down that way. If we look at another method that's based on existing modelling, so there was the precursor project, the Life IP funded project, the Rivers Trust led, and we worked with LEC to model using similar models, dynamic top model and JFlow, to look at the potential for NFM, and catchments with a blue outline in those diagrams on the top left. The parameter shows that there's a greater amount of attenuation predicted given the NFM that's installed. So that might be another way of refining things down. So using method one and sort of refining down to small watersheds impinging on populations at risk of frequent flooding, you can see that we narrow down some of the NFM, and you can see that this is kind of fairly well distributed around the Kent catchment in this instance. We can also see that if we compare with the Life IP modelling, that this kind of area on the western side was where it was predicted to be more effective, and that might be to do with how much was NFM was put in place, or it might just be simply to do with the network. We were confident that we could take those forwards as a sort of realistic scenario. So in summary, for that RT1 there, we've listened to the comments and filtered down to a credible set of changes based on twice the current rate that's been implemented over the last 25 years based on CaBA data, and also the DEF for £15 million investigations. And the filtering has been done by prioritising NFM in small catchments less than 10 kilometres squared above communities at risk of frequent flooding. And you can see that we've got the numbers down to sort of, in our scenarios, the spatial areas of what we're doing down to what was estimated by the Rivers Trust. We also had to do this for the Derwent catchment, and here you can see quite clearly the topography, but you can see the black dots are actually the populations at risk following those criteria. And you can see that also in this top area in the north, you can see the more effective from previous modelling. And you can see that in that area we've also got plenty of NFM in terms of pasture woodland. That's where the soil permeable soils have intersected the grassland, and we've also got plenty of storage there in the sort of red features. Looking into the Eden, much bigger catchment, so Derwent is 660 kilometres squared and the Eden is 2,300 kilometres squared. You can see that there was some modelling done in that Life IP study in the headwaters of the catchment, but you can also see that the technique for refining down is also fairly equitable around such a big catchment. So we do have measures dotted around the whole of the Eden. But if we look at those places that are more effective in the modelling, we can see that there are some areas of flow attenuation, perhaps in stream, leaky barriers and storage here in those areas. So, in summary, we've co-created 5 realistic partner scenarios based on the EA maps originally, and then through engagement workshops and feedback on size, location and quantity, we've refined them further. And then we filtered down to a credible set of changes based on twice the current rate of implementation for 25 years from analysis of what's been put in place. That's analysis done by the Rivers Trust based on the CaBA data. And then the filtering has been done by 2 methods, although I favoured the first method, which is simply prioritising NFM in small catchments, where we think NFM from the evidence is more effective and where people are at risk from frequent flooding, or they're in the 1 in 30 year return period surface water flood map. So that's helped us be fairly objective about filtering down. And of course, there's another 5 scenarios, which are the broader kind of end member scenarios that we're also modelling in the group. So thanks for listening.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Butler from the CaBA Technical Support Team, and I'm going to give you an introduction to the new CaBA Coastal and Estuarine Data Package which we've been developing over the past year. So for anyone who isn't familiar with the data package, it's a national evidence base of over 150 data sets brought together from different sectors and government agencies, which is available to every CaBA partnership. The data's been made easy to access and it's visualised to display the most relevant and important attributes, and it's also supported by a user guide. It's worth saying that the data package is more than just open data. It also includes a range of difficult to license data sets which are provided to partnerships under a centrally negotiated data license. For example, the water abstractions data, land cover map and the Water Industry National Environment Programme. But we realised that data on estuaries and coastal waters was a gap in the data package, and so over the past year we've worked to expand the data package to include more layers relevant to these environments. And this work's been supported by the WAM Wholescape Approach to Marine Management project, which we mentioned earlier, with the aim of facilitating closer working between coastal and CaBA partnerships. So the new coastal and estuarine data includes a further 30 online GIS layers related to coastal, estuarine and marine environments, and it includes data from a wide range of organisations. It is work in progress, so if you know of any other data sets that would be good to include, please let us know via the chat, or you can contact us afterwards. So what's available? Well, there's many data sets that can help coastal and CaBA partnerships identify opportunities for collaboration based around habitat and wildlife, recreation and culture, socioeconomic factors and coastal erosion. For example, we've included the recently released potential coastal habitat restoration maps from the EA and MMO, which highlight potential areas for salt marsh seagrass and native oyster bed restoration. There's also data in there that can help identify issues and pressures in coastal and estuarine waters, including the WFD classification data, information on plastic pollution, NVZs and bathing water status, plus data to help understand the characteristics of coastal waters and highlight strategic plans. As with the wider CaBA data package, all these data sets have been visualised to highlight the key attributes, and where possible we've customised the pop-ups to ease interpretation and provide links to further data sources. To sit alongside the data layers, we've also developed the Coastal Data Explorer. This is a simple web application which enables you to explore the data online without the need for any specialist GIS software or experience. And within the Explorer, you've got the option to add any of the coastal layers plus any layers from the wider online CaBA data package. So this allows you to start bringing together coastal and catchment data to build up that wholescape picture. You can also use the Explorer to find your neighbouring coastal or CaBA partnerships and to get in touch with them and start a conversation about collaboration. You can access all these resources via the online CaBA data package at data.catchmentbasedapproach.org. If you head to the working groups page on that site and look for estuaries and coasts, you'll find all the links. If you're an ArcGIS user, you can request to join the CaBA Coastal and Estuarine ArcGIS group, which will make it a bit easier to search for and add these data sets into your desktop GIS and online maps. And you'll also find a link on that page to watch a more detailed webinar about how to access and start using the coastal data, which we held a few months ago. So thank you for listening. If you've got any questions or further suggestions, please get in touch with us at info@catchmentbasedapproach.org. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dave Gunnell and I'm part of the team that produces Modular River Survey, also known as MORPH. My main focus is on Cartographer, which is the online tool that we use to collect and manage MORPH data. And in this talk, I want to give you an update about what we've been doing this year in MORPH, and in particular on the software improvements we've made to Cartographer to support MORPH. So the high-level overview of MORPH is that it's a physical habitat survey for use on rivers, and we have two versions of it. There's a citizen science version, which you can teach to volunteers and you can use for ongoing monitoring, and there's a professional version, which has more detail, it's more complicated, and there are more detailed use cases like biodiversity net gain. You can read more about both of these versions of MORPH and the use cases, the ways to get involved and the ways to get training on our website, modularriversurvey.org. And this is also the place you come to submit survey data and to browse survey data via this login link in the top right. Now we use an online platform called Cartographer to record our data. And for the rest of this talk, I want to talk about new features that we've added to Cartographer to make MORPH better. So the first feature is one called workspaces. And you can think of workspaces as miniature websites that are dedicated to a particular partnering organisation that's contributing to MORPH. So when we started MORPH a few years ago, we had one workspace. It was one website. All of the users had access to that one website. All of the surveys were recorded there. All of the maps were stored there, and so on. So one central location. But as MORPH grew, we started to get hundreds of users and thousands of surveys, and our small core team of 3 or 4 people was having more and more difficulty managing all of that. So now we've started to separate this thing out into multiple workspaces. So different partnering organisations have their own separate MORPH websites, and when you click that login link on the Modular River Survey homepage, you're automatically sent to the right workspace for you. So this is very transparent. Now every workspace looks more or less the same. You have a list of surveys, you have maps pertaining to your local area, you have all of your user accounts of your volunteers, and you have tools to do your own internal QA. So everything is focused on your local organisation, but we don't want local organisations to sort of be siloed off from one another. So within Cartographer, there's a very simple set of controls on different web pages, like this drop-down menu here, that allow you to switch from having a view of just your data to having a read-only view of all of the QA data from all participating organisations. So your survey list includes everyone's surveys, and your map shows the complete national data set collected by all partners. So you can view this data online, you can view our maps online within Cartographer, and you can also export this data in its entirety for further analysis, which brings me on to the second new thing we've added, which is some new integrations. Now you've always been able to get data out of Cartographer for analysis in tools like Excel. We've allowed our map data out into tools like Google Earth and into GIS apps like QGIS. But the new integration that we've added, which is really a key advancement, is integration with ArcGIS Online. Now, historically, you could manually export data from Cartographer and manually import it into ArcGIS, and that was all fine. The significant thing here is that because Cartographer and ArcGIS Online are both permanently online web services, our integration is automatic. So you don't need to do any manual downloads, you don't need to do any uploads. We simply routinely copy data from Cartographer onto ArcGIS, and you can access the layer there with all of your Esri tools, for example, story maps. And we're still finalising the details of this, but this is also the basis for getting MORPH data into the CaBA Data Hub. So this will be coming later this year. We just have a few I's to dot and T's to cross, but that data will just automatically be synchronized out of Cartographer onto ArcGIS. So that covers how you get data out of Cartographer. We've also got a new advancement to help you get data into Cartographer with a new mobile app. And this is pretty self-explanatory. It's for phones and for tablets, and the use case is to record surveys in the field. So you don't need a network connection, you can record your morph surveys, and you can upload them later when you get back to the office and you have a Wi-Fi connection. Now, we're taking a break from the typical way people design these monitoring apps, which is rather than have an app for morph and an app for every other thing on Cartographer, we're going to have one mobile app that covers everything, all of your surveys, all of your workspaces, and your login will give you access to the web and to mobile all in one place. Now, this is basically feature complete now. We currently have it in beta, and it's going to launch on iOS and Android for free later this year. If you're interested in getting into the beta and you're already a morph surveyor, log into Cartographer and you'll find some clear signposting there for how to get on board. So that's just a few updates. We've talked about improvements to Cartographer for morph, both to help you record your data locally and share it with your partners, how to get it out of Cartographer into external web services and external locations so you can do analysis, and how to get it into Cartographer more easily through this new mobile app. And we're going to continue making improvements like this in 2021. So if you want to know more, you can find our website. You can join our email newsletter to be automatically updated when we announce new things. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email address is hello@cartographer.io. Thanks for listening.
The SciMap Toolkit allows you to answer one question, which is, where do you place mitigation features for diffuse problems within the landscape? So SciMap mapping is based on a risk-based approach to look across landscapes and across catchments and analyse their connectivity and source risks to come up with detailed maps that have fine spatial resolution with subfield scale detail, but at the landscape extent. And these predictions then give you an idea of the likely spatial sources of diffuse pollutants from across the landscape. In terms of the foundations, the key concept is that of the critical source area. So this is where the sources and connections combine together to create a problem. SciMap maps out the erosion and mobilization, the connectivity and pathways, and then that is routed through the landscape. The approach takes a time integrated rather than dynamic view of the world to look where on average most of the pollutants are coming from, rather than in response to a certain storm event. Now, there's a number of kind of more refined versions of SciMap. There is the SciMap fitted approach, which aims to match a spatial pattern of observations around kind of salmon and trout, phosphorus and nitrogen, or FIOs, or in the case of the map here, the trophic diatom index. And that enables you to fit the land use weights to those different land covers to get a more refined SciMap map. There's also the SciMap FIO tool. Now, this combines together a model from David Oliver around the burden and the contribution of E. coli to certain location. That was then kind of upscaled and spatialized across catchments, and that can be integrated with the connectivity and the SciMap treatment to give likely sources of connectivity. So all of these tools are available as part of the My SciMap web-based applications. So I'm just going to quickly show you those now. This is the FIO version of the My SciMap web application. And what you can see here is the Yorkshire Derwent catchment that's been calculated. And within this system, you're able to go through and calculate the catchment and the risk ratings and output the results. So you can create a new catchment for anywhere that you're interested in. So you can zoom into a certain area, select a point on a channel as your catchment outlet. So just click here, for example, you can give it a name, click calculate, it will go through and calculate that river channel. But here's one I prepared earlier, which is the Yorkshire Derwent. So here you can see the DEM and the channels. This is the land cover. This is the rainfall map. And this is a sample from the national FIO burden layer. For each of these catchments, you can calculate parameters. So here, if we're going to do a standard sediment SciMap, the Yorkshire Derwent is a standard set of risk weightings. Then when we go into the Build tab, we can create a new simulation. So North Yorkshire, select out our catchment as the Yorkshire Derwent. We can either do a seasonal FIO burden, we can do it with a custom set for the FIO, or we can use a parameter set for doing sediment. So we can select Yorkshire Derwent, and if we click run, that will then run through the sediment version. If we use an FIO seasonal set, we can say, well, actually, what is the July FIO burden across this catchment, and click run. Once we've run that, we can go to the results tab, and here we can see that for the Yorkshire Derwent, this is the annual maximum FIO load. I just turn the background off and change it to the aerial mapping. You can see here that we're able to map out where these are across the different river channels. I'll just zoom back out to the full catchment. But for the same catchment, we can also look at the sediment and the erosion risk potential for the sediment. So this then starts to highlight out certain hillsides, certain slopes that are more useful to look at. Once you've got these results, you want to be able to export them out to a GIS system. At the bottom, you've got three options. You can download the results that will give you a set of GeoTIFF files. You can export it as a KMZ, and also you can get a WMS link, a web mapping service link. Overall, SciMap is a risk mapping tool. It works for sediments, it works for nutrients, and for FIOs. You can use the web-based versions at MySciMap or FIO.scimap, and there is a desktop version for dealing with larger data sets.
Hi, I'm Catherine McElwraith. I'm from the Data and Evidence team at the Rivers Trust. In this presentation, I'm going to cover the process of using GIS analysis to estimate potential storage capacity of natural flood management ponds and wetlands. Small organisations like local rivers trusts and others are increasingly becoming involved in the delivery of NFM schemes. They are really well placed to do this, as they often have existing relationships with landowners and local communities, and they have experience of delivering biodiversity improvements. However, in terms of NFM schemes, they're often being asked to provide estimates of volumes held back. Estimating the volume of NFM features is often a difficult task for small organisations to do, especially if they're lacking any specialist equipment. In this presentation, I'm going to go through some of the techniques that we've been using at the Rivers Trust to quickly assess potential storage capacity for NFM ponds and wetlands. I'll show how small organisations with access to GIS software can quickly assess a number of potential pond locations in terms of storage capacity, and then allow them to identify their priorities. These prioritised locations can then be taken forward to detailed design and construction plans. In order to use this approach, the first thing that you'll need access to is some sort of GIS software. So I'm using ArcGIS Pro. However, it should be possible to replicate this workflow using open source software such as QGIS. The next thing that you'll need in order to assess the potential storage capacity is terrain data. The most widely available terrain dataset is LiDAR, which can be freely downloaded, and it's a great resource where there is coverage. However, another tool which has become increasingly available in recent years is the use of drones to obtain terrain data through a technique called photogrammetry. In order to illustrate the GIS workflow, I'm now going to go through a case study of a project I did recently with Eden Rivers Trust in Cumbria. I initially went out on site with two members of the Eden Rivers Trust conservation team. So the site sits in a natural bowl where a small stream would originally have run down the lowest lying land. However, at some point in the past, the stream has been diverted around the edge of the site, and in more recent times this modification has started to fail, and some water is now finding its way into the natural course of the stream. This makes the whole site very wet, and there are signs that during rainfall an ephemeral channel appears in the original course of the stream. Eden Rivers Trust had already been in contact with the landowner, who was open to a proposal involving a pond, and so it looked like a viable option to pursue. After the site visit, I started on the GIS analysis of the site. So sometimes you might only have access to 1 metre LiDAR, which will give you a very rough estimate, particularly for small ponds and wetlands. But in this case, Eden Rivers Trust have a basic drone, a DJI Phantom 4, so we could use photogrammetry to obtain a 10 centimetre resolution DTM for the area surrounding the pond site. So this is the output DTM from the drone survey, which clearly shows the natural bowl of the landscape. Once we'd done the drone survey and generated the DTM, the next step was to create a contour map. So by looking at the contours, it was possible to see that there was a slight constriction in the natural form of the land, which looked like a good potential location to add a bund. And then the pond would be formed by water backing up behind that bund. The next step was to convert the drone-derived DTM into points data, with each point representing a height which could then be edited. In order to increase the potential capacity of the pond, I identified a subsection of the total pond area to be excavated. I could then select the points which lay within the sub-area and edit them down to a lower height. Finally, I converted all the points back into a DTM, which then represented the excavated pond. I've produced a couple of videos on this workflow, which can be found by searching for estimating pond storage volumes on the Rivers Trust YouTube channel. So if anybody would like to do this themselves, then the workflow is covered in far more detail in the video tutorials. So in summary, GIS analysis can be a useful way for small organisations without access to specialist tools to investigate potential storage capacities of a range of options quickly. It can give you an indication if storage capacity gained is likely to be acceptable to funders, and the opportunities which look most promising from this initial analysis can then be taken forward and detailed design and construction plans can be obtained. Finally, thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the CDOG forum.
Hello, my name is Adrian Hughes and I head up the GIS team at the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the work we're doing with drones and mapping. So first of all, I just wanted to tell you a bit about the RSPB. We're Europe's largest conservation charity and we own and manage over 200 nature reserves across the UK. We have over 1 million members and over 18,000 volunteers. We engage with development work to improve outcomes of wildlife. We conduct investigations into wildlife crime. We are a science-led organisation and we run numerous research projects in the UK and overseas. While we've been using drones for monitoring since 2012, this use was limited to a small technical team building their own kit. In the last few years, there's been this huge explosion in drones in all sectors, and this has been reflected in our organisation. This has been driven by availability of cheaper, ready-to-go, off-the-shelf consumer-grade drones and sensors. Now we have over 30 staff using drones across our organisation. There has also been big improvements in software that can generate useful mapping products from drone data, such as aerial imagery, digital surface models, and habitat classifications. There are a number of software options for processing drone imagery into mapping products. We went with Esri's Drone to Map application in the end, mainly due to its integration with ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Online. We also got a deal on the license through the Esri non-profit program. It's fairly intuitive to use, and despite having many settings, we mainly use the defaults for most purposes. Also, we can easily pass the one license we have between users via ArcGIS Online. Just to give an example of a common workflow, we start with mission planning, which involves setting the flight path and image overlap. Then we fly the drone, transfer the data to drone to map, and produce the various mapping products. We can then publish these products to ArcGIS Online as tiled map services. These services can then be consumed in web applications such as Merlin, the RSPB's internal corporate conservation data portal. For RSPB, by far the most common use for drones is aerial imagery, simply for visualization. Aerial imagery is hugely useful for staff wishing to monitor change at their sites. The image currently being displayed is of heather moorland on one of our reserves. This layer is hosted on ArcGIS Online and then displayed in Merlin. We can then add all kinds of other layers to the map, as you can see on the right, such as base maps, other reference layers, and local data. The advantage of drone imagery over plane flown imagery is that we can fly when we want and get an even higher resolution of just a few centimetres per pixel. To give some context to my next two slides, I wanted to mention the important work we're doing around peatland restoration across the UK. Much of the UK peatland has been damaged and needs to be restored to maximise the ecosystem services it provided and to mitigate climate change through carbon sequestration. Another mapping product that DrainToMap can create, aside from aerial imagery, is digital surface models, or DSMs, using a process called photogrammetry, where the overlapping images taken by the drone can be used to produce a 3D model of the surface. In areas such as peatland, with very low vegetation, these DSMs can be used as a proxy for digital terrain models, which show the height of the ground. We can then use tools in ArcGIS to produce high-resolution hydrological networks. These networks can help us manage water on our reserves to help restore peatland. Another area we're looking at is using image classification, again using ArcGIS tools to automatically generate habitat maps and the drone imagery. Habitat maps from the drone imagery. Here we use a machine learning process using segmentation and the support vector machine algorithm to associate pixel colours and textures from the drone image with habitats. The pink areas here show the bare peat areas. We can then use these classifications to set a baseline for the restoration work and quantitatively manage progress towards restoration targets. This photo is of Swindale Beck near our Haweswater Reserve in the Lake District. The route of the river, which passes through one of Cumbria's most beautiful but little known valleys, was altered 200 years ago to reclaim valuable land for livestock grazing and haymaking. But now we've intervened to restore Swindale Beck to its former glory by allowing it to meander freely once again. It is hoped the move will improve the habitats for spawning Atlantic salmon and trout while helping to alleviate flooding. Work has already begun here on re-engineering the river back to return to its native structure to help bring back important native species to the area. This video was created using ArcGIS Pro, where we create a 3D fly-through of the river course and topography. To make this image. Alongside our workflows, we have produced a best practice document called Drones for GIS, which contains all kinds of information of model types, flying protocols, wildlife disturbance and legal issues. This document can be found on wildlabs.net, an online forum for technology and conservation. We released a recent version of this document in March of this year. This concludes my talk. I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A or by email. Thanks for listening.
That was a really good session. Thanks very much as well for everyone using the Q&A and the comment session. I think it's starting to kind of gel, which is really good, to try and replace the networking that we normally manage to do face to face. So we've now got a short break and we are coming back after 11:30.
Hi, okay, and welcome back everybody. Sorry for that. I think my timing on my computer is maybe a couple of minutes ahead of everybody else's. But we're going to move on now to our next set of lightning talks, which are looking at how we can influence change through data and evidence, and also looking at using data and evidence to engage with different communities.
Okay, so hi, I'm Jane Mann, the Communications Manager for the Rivers Trust and CaBA, and I'm going to be talking about how you can turn your data into beautiful visuals. So why do we use visuals? You may know these stats, but 90% of information absorbed by the brain is visual, and we process images 60,000 times faster than text. So a picture really does tell 1,000 words. So this is an infographic about what an infographic is. So it's all data which then gets sorted and arranged and then visualized. Sometimes communicating scientific information to the general public can be a bit information overload. And an infographic is a picture that blends data with design, storytelling and insights that can help organisations communicate messages and impact their audiences really, really quickly. So I'm no expert, and the trends are changing quite frequently, but here are a few tips that I have found useful over the years that I would like to share with you. So the best infographics can take dry data, complex information, or a confusing timeline and make them crystal clear. So you want to have a blend of information, story, concept, and the goal, and then turn it into a visually appealing piece of information. So we do this quite a lot at the Rivers Trust and have used them for reporting the CaBA benefits report information as well. And I'm sure a lot of you already use infographics, but how many of you are using them to really communicate your impact and research to gain support or raise awareness? So these are some that I really liked, and the ones where you can visually see exactly what they're trying to tell you within a matter of minutes work really well for me. So using images to demonstrate the quantity also really helps. So in this one, they at the top left that WWF have done, they've got the pie chart, but they've turned it into a visual, so you can visually see the quantity that they're talking about without even almost reading the text. The same for the fish one underneath, which is a Marine Conservation Society, where they've done the percentages in colour coded and turned it into a fish as well, which is really visually quite impactful. But infographics are no longer static. They can now be turned into GIFs, I think known as gifographics. These are great and are getting shared on social media quite widely now, and I just love these ones so much. And one thing they've done here, which I really want to highlight, is that they've given the most important information the most visual weight, so that the viewers know exactly where to look and what to take away. So I think the thing on the top left is, the top one is that marine life is lost or corals die, and then on the bottom the nearly 50% is highlighted there quite dramatically. So tips to get you started. So you need to think about what you're trying to say. What is your story? Introduce the problem, back it up with some data, and add a conclusion if you've got it. When designing, consider negative space. Don't clutter your image. Limit your colours and choose your fonts really carefully. And as I said before, give the most important information the most visual weight. Some useful programs that I've found that we use quite frequently at the Rivers Trust is mostly Canva actually. They have a non-profit account that you can apply for, and it's really great. You can design social media images, you can do GIFs, you can do presentations. It's also Biteable, which you can create videos and animations as well. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Hello everybody and welcome to my lightning talk on the West Country Rivers Trust's portable water quality kits and looking at how we use these to monitor water quality and to engage farmers. So why do we measure water quality? Well, hopefully from this slide that you can see that everything we do on land will impact the neighbouring rivers to a lesser or greater extent. On the left, you can see a number of farming practices that will have a negative impact on water quality, such as eroded tracks and banks, a lack of fencing and buffer strips, and poor waste management. And on the right are a number of often very simple solutions which will reduce the risk of pollution. So what exactly do we measure in the water? Well, there are a huge number of parameters to assess water quality, but some are quicker and less expensive than others. The main ones that we concentrate on are nutrients, turbidity, colour, and electrical conductivity. Nutrients are present in fertilisers that are applied to crops to promote healthy growth. However, they do become problematic in the watercourse where they promote algal growth, which prevents light penetration and can lead to eutrophication. Turbidity is used as a proxy for sediment, which is lost off the land via things like the poaching of fields and gateways and track erosion. Sediment from the riverbanks can also contribute to a river's turbidity, and sediment is a problem because not only can it act as a vector for other contaminants such as pesticides and bacteria, but also smother the riverbed, making it difficult for fish to spawn and develop. Colour is used as a proxy for certain dissolved chemical compounds in the water, many of which are natural, such as the humic and fulvic acids contained within the peat on Dartmoor and Bodmin Moor, for instance. Eroded peatland environments can release large amounts of these compounds, which can become problematic in the drinking water treatment process. Electrical conductivity is basically a measure of the concentration of dissolved ions in solution, which are capable of conducting electrical current. Although this measure doesn't tell you what the pollutant is, it can be indicative of pollution events such as slurry, silage liquors or salts entering the watercourse. So how do we measure these things? Well, these are our Farm Advisor kits. They do look a bit like a briefcase full of gadgets, but that is pretty much what they are. Now, many of the parameters I just outlined are measured colorimetrically, which is a way of converting the absorption of light by the sample into a concentration of a pollutant. So the sample is loaded into the glass cuvette that you can see there in the photo, and it's placed into the colorimeter and covered up before a beam of light is shone through the sample, and the instrument then converts the absorption of this light into a pollutant concentration. For determining phosphate, this involves an additional step that causes the solution to change colour so that it can be quantified. So the colorimeters are very quick and easy to use and give instant results, and so they're perfect for use by farm advisors to show farmers what they are measuring and why, and give some context to the numbers that they will discuss with them during farm visits in terms of water quality regulations and legislation. Often just the visual observations of the samples are enough to show a farmer what kinds of issues might be present in his local river. And then the little handheld sensor you can see in the bottom right of the screen there, that's the temperature and electrical conductivity meter. So this will determine the dissolved ions in the water and give him an idea if there's been a pollution event or whether there is any waste from his farm that may be negatively impacting the river. So these kits are very useful as part of a holistic approach that we employ to engage farmers across the West Country. But because true engagement is reliant on a farmer's trust and respect, it is hard to gain and easy to lose if it's not constantly re-established through regular visits and support, through workshops and knowledge exchange. So by using these practical tools, such as these portable water quality kits, farmers can be encouraged to be more involved in understanding the impact that their farm practices have on the local rivers and be more empowered to make changes where needed. So thanks very much for listening. And again, if you have any questions about this or anything about the West Country Rivers Trust, then please get in touch.
Hello everyone, my name's Dan Hurd. I'm Head of Corporate Finance at Triodos Bank. I'm here to give you a presentation on the potential for natural capital investment in catchments. A little bit about the bank. We're a European ethical bank. We believe in using money to tackle climate change and social inequality. We've been around for 40 years. We provide banking, investment and advisory services, and sectors that we've typically been involved in the past have been renewable energy, charity, social enterprise. But as the world's changing, we're looking at new sectors, and in particular, natural capital investment in the UK is of real interest to us and potential. And many of you will have heard of natural capital. It is very much in vogue at the moment and a central part, really, of government's 25-year plan for the environment. And the main features of it, really, are that the restoration of the environment can generate valuable ecosystem services which beneficiaries will pay for. And the second part of the theory really at the moment is that we can access private investment capital to supplement public funding and therefore achieve much faster levels of environmental restoration. So that is yet still to be proven. We are currently leading a project working with DEFRA and the Environment Agency where we've identified 4 pilot projects around the UK and secured some funding from the 2 agencies. One of those is a river catchment, the Wyre catchment in the Forest of Bowland, and that's probably the most relevant for today's discussion. This is all quite new, but we do have some confidence in our approach because we have worked for a number of years in the social investment sector around an area called social impact bonds, where we've managed to bring private sector risk capital in to tackle intractable social issues such as homelessness, children in care, and other difficult social problems which cost local authorities and the government a lot of money. If we take a look at a catchment, there are some obvious challenges to creating a commercial model. First one would be that there are numerous stakeholders in a typical catchment. They're listed down the left there. Those stakeholders, I guess, tend to work together within the catchment partnership, but equally will have their own priorities of what they want from the catchment. And the ecosystem services that can be delivered by a catchment are many and varied. The ones at the bottom, agriculture, public access, business and sporting interests, are probably already being established and used by those stakeholders. Some of the more natural ecosystem services around natural flood management, biodiversity gain, carbon sequestration, this is where the potential is to really invest in the environment and see if we can quantify and monetize some of those stated ecosystem services there. There are some challenges to this approach, of course. The first one maybe being, is there in fact a shared vision for the catchment that everyone could get comfortable with? The second one is, how do we, probably the most important one really, how do we create a commercial model of a river catchment which is suitable for attracting private investment? Investors will say, what am I investing in? How much money do you want, and how are you going to repay my money? So really that's the heart of the whole problem, or the whole challenge, and we need to come up with an answer to that. Thirdly, who will lead the project? Who will do the intermediation between these various stakeholders? And who will develop the business case and actually raise the capital? So I'm confident we can do this. The pilot projects are proving quite challenging, but we're making good progress. This one here is a bit of a summary of what we're doing in the Wyre catchment. The project promoter is the Rivers Trust, and we're working with them, and obviously the Wyre Rivers Trust, part of the Rivers Trust movement. So the two of us are working together to effectively intermediate between all the various parties. And this little diagram is not quite as complex as it might look, because really all we're doing is establishing a new vehicle, the SPV at the heart of this, the blue box. This will be a not-for-profit company designed to be the financing and delivery vehicle for the Wyre catchment. It is a natural flood management-led solution. That's our main ecosystem service we're looking to deliver. Though there will be some tree planting, carbon sequestration, biodiversity gain, and potentially some water quality improvements coming from the vision for the catchment. And essentially what we're looking to do is raise external capital. That's the red box in the top right-hand corner. We're hoping that investors will ultimately invest in a business plan for the catchment. They'll put money into the SPV. The SPV will pay to deliver the numerous NFM interventions by entering into agreements with the various landowners in the catchment. Those landowners, of course, want to know that they're going to get paid for a change of land use. So that is an inherent feature of a NFM-based approach. The most important box of all probably is identifying, is the yellow box, identifying who the buyers of the ecosystem services will be. And you have to start really by mapping who the potential beneficiaries are, then engaging with them, and then seeing if they will actually enter into a contract to buy those services. Typical NFM beneficiaries might well be in a catchment, might well be the local authority, the local community, local businesses, maybe the water company will have assets in the catchment, the Environment Agency might well have assets in the catchment, the insurance industry may wish to see flood risk reduced. So on paper, at least, there are a number of potential buyers of those services. And the purpose of the project really is to test out which of them will actually come to the table and enter into a contract to buy those services. So finally, moving on to the relevance of modelling. Firstly, what do investors need to invest in the catchment? They need a business plan. They want evidence of a revenue stream, some customers. Without a revenue stream, they're not going to get repaid, so that's important. And they want a vehicle to invest in. The modelling is vitally important to the business plan. It is, in fact, the core element of the plan. A shared model for the catchment which all stakeholders can get comfortable with, can test, can challenge. It's appearing to be really the starting point of an NFM-based solution. We've taken a very open book approach on the wire, and we've invited a number of those beneficiaries I just mentioned in to a modelling working group to look at the various options we have for interventions in the catchment and the outputs in terms of reduced flood risk. So the modelling itself brings everyone together, identifies what the outputs are. It helps us identify the capital cost of the overall solution, and ultimately will help drive the nature of the contracts with those beneficiaries. And that could be a combination of a fixed payment for flood risk mitigation, and then maybe a payment for outcomes-based approach, which will be measured by looking at actual flood risk mitigation, maybe against the original base case model. So it's all quite new. I'm really hoping that we can report a bit more over the coming months as the project matures, and that you found this a useful introduction to natural capital investment. Thank you very much.
This is the presentation from the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group on our natural capital data cycling under our Environmental Land Management Scheme Integrated Local Delivery Trial. What we wanted to do was to help DEFRA in designing a way of mapping natural capital that was simple forward-facing to farmers, that used existing data that could come from the Rural Payments Agency to create a land management plan that would actually be based around UK habitat mapping that was translated from all the way that we currently assess land for environmental impact. So natural vegetation classification for phase 1 habitat survey, FEPS, FAIRS, UNIS, and all the others can be translated into UK habitat mapping. What we want to show in our trial is the role of an advisor and how an advisor can help assess that land with the farmer to attribute function to the natural capital map, and that might be then submitted for analysis to be able to look at the ecosystem service functionality of that land based on science by working with partners in CH and Rothamsted. And then farmers might collaborate across the landscape to create opportunities for catchment management, where farmers come together to actually build sustainable water and soil management and look at habitat restoration by field parcel to help communities and community resilience. This would then lead on to an opportunity to create a baseline map that was verified by farmers that links into the nature recovery networks and the local nature recovery strategies. It would fit with the biodiversity matrix because UK habitat mapping have been designed and developed by the same people, ecologists, and it would mean that we then had a common platform under ELMS also for that was able to be used for the nature recovery network. That would mean that linking our economic growth and mitigations from human pressures could be linked into the same system. It would also enable us to create an opportunity for collaboration and landscape scale opportunities for public, private and third sector to be able to come together and invest back into that natural capital that had been assessed on the farms, so that everybody could be able to work together with farmers as part of the partnership and communities to invest in building resilience, economic resilience post-COVID, transition through Brexit, and actually acting on climate change emergencies. This system would be compatible with existing government mapping systems and would enable us to hold data potentially with Ordnance Survey, so that across government could share and analyse data, and that farmers could understand how their land could help in that action and how it's been prioritised by many different organisations. This has been a partnership endeavour by lots of different organisations led by FWAG, and we're very grateful for everybody's input, and would be very happy to work with anybody and share what we've learnt and learn more from others. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rachel Linan, and I'll be talking briefly about the EA's new tool, the Natural Capital Register and Account tool. Natural capital registers and accounts have a variety of different uses. In the short term, we've found that they are very valuable in starting new conversations about the value of natural assets and natural resources to the local economy. In the longer term, we predict they'll be able to help to establish an asset and values baseline for a place, so demonstrating whether there's been net gain or net loss. They can also be really useful in supporting the management of environmental risks. Failure to account properly for natural capital has in the past led to undervalued services and overexploited assets. We also think that they can support good decision making and place-based planning. Ideally, a natural capital register and account should include, for the register, a list of habitat types, including their quantitative information and qualitative or condition data associated with them, their spatial location, any pressures and risks on those habitats, and land ownership. For an account, it needs to have the physical ecosystem service flows, values associated with those ecosystem services in monetized forms over a year and 100-year periods. It should also express qualitative benefits associated with those natural resources and ecosystem services and any associated costs in their management. It can also include information about who benefits from those natural assets or ecosystem services. The Environment Agency has been working to create a transferable and replicable tool for land managers to create place-based natural capital accounts. Our aim is to enable people who aren't necessarily economists or ecologists to be able to use this economic information as a powerful tool in the conversation about preserving our natural environment and generating greater investment in it. The tool can be used at different scales, so whether that's across several river basin districts, several WFD management catchments, a single WFD management catchment, a single local authority, or multiple local authorities, or an operational catchment. It also comes with a scorecard that is designed to graphically represent the outputs of the tool. We are internally releasing the tool in this quarter 2 of 2020, and looking to release it externally in quarter 3 and quarter 4 of 2020. This is a simple flow diagram which shows how the tool functions. So we've got some basic inputs that are required to make it work about habitat quantity and habitat quality, also about water supply data, which can be requested from the EA, recreation data, which is easy to derive from the online Orville tool created by the University of Exeter, and also more bespoke information that can be input to provide greater local context. There's also space to input information about risks, significance of ecosystem services within your place boundaries, and information about who benefits from the natural resources and those ecosystem services. Then there are background calculations that go on within the spreadsheet tool to estimate flow data and monetary data. And those are all summarised in an output statement, a single sheet within the tool, and that information can then be put into a dashboard or scorecard. The tool estimates flow data and monetary data for 13 ecosystem services, which are shown here with these icons. So the product that we're launching will be the Natural Capital Register and Account tool and the company scorecard or dashboard template. There will also be user support in the form of a report that tells you what the Register and Account tool is and what it's designed to do, a user guide which takes you through how to create your Register and Account, a benefits explained guide to interpreting your outputs, and webinars to guide you through it. We've done several case studies and tests leading up to this launch. Here's one example of an EA integrated environmental planning team based in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire using the output of the tool to engage with their local enterprise partnership and communicate the value of the local natural assets to the local economy. And this conversation has helped to bring those natural resources into the investment planning that the local enterprise partnership are doing, in particular their natural flood management planning, and put the environment more squarely on the table to open up discussions about future planning and investment planning. This is a screenshot of an example of the scorecard dashboard that we use to communicate the outputs from the registering account tool. The next version is currently in development, but it will use some of these infographics. If you're interested in hearing more about the tool, please contact at this address.
This flash talk is going to present a piece of work describing a searchable tool for evidence on the cost effectiveness of interventions for improving the environment. Interventions span a variety of sectors as well as landscapes and can range from nature-based to engineering solutions through to compliance and even behavioural change. Often there are several interventions that could be used to address the same environmental pressures and achieve the same or similar outcomes. The aim of this work is to synthesize internal and external evidence on cost effectiveness of interventions in a single inventory, ensuring that it is searchable and accessible as a tool. Ultimately, it's hoped that such a tool and inventory could encourage integrated planning and decision-making across different initiatives. In order to make the tool accessible, it has been developed in Survey 123 and ArcGIS online by Esri. This software, as well as being accessible to all via the internet, gives the opportunity to develop a visually engaging tool to facilitate both data entry and analysis. Also, as many or all of you will know, these software are already adopted and well used by other organisations including CaBA, the Rivers Trust and DEFRA, to name a few. Here we are showing the overall flow from the sources of information we are considering to entering information into the inventory database and later using that data for analysis. We're going to quickly discuss each of these steps along with the demo of the prototype tool. So we start with the external data that will be entered into the inventory. This may come from different sources: guidance documents, review reports, academic studies, grey literature case studies, and arguably, most importantly, straight from the source as part of a project appraisal. In fact, the key challenge to overcome in this project is the heterogeneity of the data available, both with regards to the sources of information that could populate the inventory and the range of interventions and outcomes for which information and data could be collated. For the tool to fulfill its potential, information needs to be cross-comparable and easy to interrogate. So next is actually entering the data using Survey 123. Here you can see our dashboard user interface, which is the first screen a user of the tool will see. From here they will be able to interrogate data, which we'll get to later, but by clicking here the user can access Survey 123 and add information to the inventory. There are different pathways through the survey, determined by the answers to the first two questions. This is one way in which we are trying to deal with the heterogeneity of the information we're trying to capture and create a more engaging and less time-consuming experience for the end user. The survey is intuitive and has a variety of features that improve the user experience. There are a variety of answer types appropriate to the type of information that is being collected: free text, tick boxes, multiple selections, drop-down lists, navigable maps, and so on. Survey 123 is a user-friendly interface through which a database is populated. The database can be exported to more familiar formats such as Excel, but really the Arc Online user interface will allow visualization and interrogation of the data to answer a user's question. The proof of concept dashboard is tailored to filtering data by intervention type to assess the cost and effectiveness of one intervention, and then using the map to further interrogate the schemes where this intervention has been implemented. Other questions an end user may have are: how does intervention X compare to intervention Y? What interventions will achieve outcome A? Enhancing the ability to compare interventions and outcomes within the dashboard is an aspiration and should be informed by end user testing and further population of the database. Other key features of the dashboard are the ability to select data spatially using the Select tool and the Map view. We can also add other spatial datasets to the map, which add important contextual information. And we also have the ability to add our own shapefiles or our own spatial data. Finally, for this quick demo, another key feature is that we can embed URLs direct to the source of the information within the database itself and accessible through the map and the attribute table. So that really was a whistle-stop tour through the project. The next stage of development for the inventory and tool is going to rely on further population and end-user testing. Once the inventory is built up, the capabilities of the dashboard to fulfill different end-user requirements can be iteratively improved. As touched upon earlier, there is currently no central source of sufficient holistic information to assist in identifying environmental intervention options able to compare cost and effectiveness across a range of different sectors and outcomes. This tool aims to provide that consistent and accessible information about interventions. Hopefully, this prototype demonstration has shown that this goal will be possible with the right support and input from end users.
Okay, so thank you very much there to all our speakers for some really thought-provoking and interesting talks. A couple of really different presentations for us at CDUG, talk for an investment banker being the first. So thank you, and it's good to see all the interaction that's been taking place on the Q&A. So I'd now like to invite all of our morning speakers who are with us to, if they can turn on the video and join us for the panel and the voting session. So we're going to kick off this discussion session with some interactive voting. And for those of you who've joined us at the forum before, you'll know this is something that we often do at our events, and it's really helpful to provide feedback and guide us and identify and sort of inform priorities. So just to explain a little bit about how the voting will work. Michelle will open the question on the screen and you should see it pop up on your screen. It's a good idea to expand the question out to the full screen just so you can see all the answers. Some of them have quite a lot of options. Please don't vote straight away. We'll have the opportunity to have a bit of discussion around the questions and just check people are happy with what we're asking and understand them, and capture any comments that people want to make along with the question, and then we'll tell you it's time to vote and give you a minute or so to vote, and then we'll be able to share the results on the screen and have some more discussion around it. And I might ask some of our panelists to comment based on the results that we get from the voting questions. If we've got any time at the end of doing the voting, we'll have a chance to have a few more questions to our speakers this morning. So if you've got anything you'd still like to ask, please feel free to pop it in the Q&A as we're going along. So Michelle, if you could launch the first poll for us, that'd be great. So hopefully you can all see that now on your screen. So first question this morning, it's really a reflection on many of the topics that we've heard from our speakers. We wanted to ask you all to reflect on where you see the greatest opportunities for the data and evidence community to support CaBA in engaging with communities to influence change. So hopefully the question's clear, but if anybody's got any comments, please feel free to post them in the chat. So just to make clear, in terms of communities, we're not just talking about engaging with the public here, we also mean engaging with different communities, so farmers, investors, water companies, etc. And in terms of the options, we've got collaborative catchment modelling, so that's touching on some of the talks we heard, particularly the points made by Alex about involving people in modelling and how that's got the benefits of helping challenge people's sort of norms and identities and beliefs, and also things like the developing realistic scenarios that were picked up in Barry's talk, and also the importance that Dan mentioned in terms of engaging with investors. Our second option there is on communication tools for visualizing data. So that's picking up on the things Jane mentioned. Do we have more opportunities or need to do more to sort of support CaBA to visualize our data more simply and engaging to engage with the public and sort of media? Third option there is around remote sensing and 3D analysis and visualization tools. So picking up on the points that Adrian and Catherine made in their talks about the opportunities for using drones to help with analysis and also to visualize and help us sort of share and understand what's going on in catchments with people more easily. Fourth option is around the opportunity to support CaBA through more development of natural capital accounting tools and cost benefit tools. So picking up on things that Emily and Rachel and Jenny and Amina mentioned. Then we've got opportunities around citizen science and monitoring, mentioned by Holly, and we'll be picking up on that a bit more this afternoon. Or do we need to do more around sort of water quality data analysis, so not just developing the citizen science programs to collect data, but supporting CaBA to be able to analyse that data. And then a final option, which is sort of picking up on Alex's talk, should we as a community be engaging more with social scientists to sort of add in extra training around sort of social science and understanding behavioural change? And then we've got an option for other. So if there's something else that you think is an opportunity that the data and evidence community should be doing, if you just type in the Q&A to tell us what you meant by that. So nobody's posted anything in the Q&A, so hopefully that was a clear question. So we'll now give you a minute or so just to vote if you haven't already.
Lucy, I was thinking also of just asking Alex, if you unmute yourself. I mean, there's been a few comments, there's quite a bit of voting about training in social science. How do you think we need that sort of training? What's your view in terms of your experience?
I think it's a really interesting question. I would say there's a real need for social scientists to understand more about data and evidence and marketing and visualization. And I think there's definitely a need for folks involved in data and evidence provision to understand more about human behaviours. So yeah, I'd definitely advocate there's a need for the two communities to understand each other's relevant expertise better, if that answers your question.
Okay, so a couple of things that we've maybe had in terms of the others. Mark's suggesting also mapping out existing groups and communities that would be good to target for citizen science. And Andrew's asked why there's no reference to sort of green finance in the question. So I think that was picked up in Dan's talk a bit, and I was kind of thinking that was covered maybe under the natural capital and accounting cost benefit tools, but we can mention that as well. And also Mark's mentioned in the others a focus on feedback loops that communicate progress. So I think we can probably close the poll now and share the results. So it looks like we need more support there from sort of comms in terms of comms tools for visualizing data and making it more engaging, and how to explain that and sort of share that with communities. So maybe ask Jane if she's got anything to say on how we could maybe do that as a community further from what she said in her talk.
Oh, put me on the spot. I'm just pleased that everyone identifies that communicating the data is vitally important, and I think there is some work to do in researching how that's best visualized, because it's quite heavy, some of the data that you guys have got, so we can work on that maybe. But it's definitely your data team needs to definitely connect with your communications people.
Jane, do you think it's worth, I mean, you've had a kind of a couple of years of battling with us lot and trying to kind of turn our unintelligible stuff into something kind of more meaningful. Do you think this gives us a bit of a mandate for a webinar or something that on some of the stuff that you've learned over the last couple of years?
yeah, we could do something like that. I mean, I think there's still a lot to learn, and actually I'm still learning. I'm hoping to go on a webinar myself. There's a website called informationisbeautiful.net, and they have webinars about turning data into visuals, and they have some amazing data sets I think are absolutely amazing. So perhaps after I've done that, I could then do one for you guys.
Okay, thanks, Jane. That's a good idea, Dave, to follow that up. And then just maybe pick up on the next two that came in the highest. So people obviously see a lot of opportunity around citizen science and monitoring, which is excellent, and we'll be focusing on that a bit more this afternoon, particularly in terms of the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. And Alex, I thought I'd maybe just pick up on a question that's maybe related to that was asked in the Q&A from Izzy, which quite a few people upvoted, that was quite interesting. And she asked how you deal with the situation where there's people that are sort of willing and requesting to get involved in sort of citizen science and engagement, but they're not actually the people whose sort of changing behaviour would make the most difference.
Yeah, I tried to answer that very briefly on the system. I think it's a really interesting question. You're basically talking about how do you engage folk that don't necessarily want to be engaged, and my experience is that just takes a lot of time, and you've got to almost start a catchment planning process with a quite an intensive period of going around your catchment and engaging people, building social capital with them, trying to infuse them in the idea of coming along to meetings and getting involved with trying to develop a change in the catchment. So it involves time, it's very difficult, and it also needs very gifted facilitators and people who can actually engage with their fellow human beings.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And that maybe links with the point that Mark had made in the chat. Do you think it's something that we need to do through the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative to spend more time identifying those groups that we should be engaging with?
Yeah, I would say it's absolutely key. It's key to any future planning process. Within a catchment, it is spending time understanding your audiences, understanding the people, and engaging them to come along and get involved. I think you've got to do that before you start showing them lots of information. I'm quite interested in the response profile to the first question, training in social science and behaviour change. That seems to be the second least voted option. Obviously I would say this because I'm a social scientist, but I think it's crucial to understand who you're trying to communicate to before you start throwing data at them. And it's quite interesting. Obviously my perception of how to solve a problem is quite different. It seems to be the majority of people on the call here, so it's an interesting
Alex, how could we go about that? I mean, what would be a good first step over the next year that we could go, well, we've started trying to address that particular question. I know it's sort of fairly low on the priorities, but we've had this before in previous years where we've kind of something's sort of gradually grown. So have you got any ideas on what small things we could do to move us forward?
Sorry, Dave, in terms of how to potentially provide training in social science to non-social scientists, big question again. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Need to give it some more thought. I think the demand's got to be there first, Dave. And if the demand's not there, I think setting up training packages and all the rest of it is probably a bit premature.
Okay, thanks, Alex. It was maybe something new to quite a lot of people today, what you were presenting, so maybe after people have had more chance to think about it and digest, there might be more interest growing in that area. So just to finish our discussion session off, we've got one last question to ask. So if Michelle could bring the next question up on the screen, that'd be great. So we mentioned right at the beginning, at the introduction, that we were also supported by the Wholescape Approach to Marine Management project today. And this year we've tried to broaden the focus of the forum a little bit to include a few more presentations on coastal and track water environments. You heard a bit about the coastal data package, and we've got a couple of presentations about some citizen science initiatives in this area this afternoon. So we wanted to ask people if we should broaden the focus of the catchment data user group and also of the forum to include the Coastal Partnership Network and also the nature recovery networks. Or whether people think that each of those should have their own sort of separate data and evidence community support. But it looks like most people are sort of very positive to that idea of broadening out the focus of CDUG and the forum. Just over sort of half people saying yes to do that to the nature recovery networks and also the coastal partnership network. A few of you have ticked other, so if there were some other areas that you think we should broaden in, if you could type those in the Q&A, that would be great to help us capture those. And in terms of the nature recovery networks, one of the webinars that we're having tomorrow is with the biodiversity working group, particularly looking at data and evidence to sort of support habitat restoration and nature recovery. And so Gina's also added that we should be thinking about more to include the local nature partnerships, and that they're also working on things that we could include and cover. So thanks for that point, Gina. So just like to say thank you again to all our speakers this morning for recording such interesting talks for us. I'm sure if you've got any questions that you'd still like to ask them, if you continue to post them in the Q&A over lunch or when we come back afterwards, people will try and answer those questions for you. So that's the end of our morning session now, and we're going to have a break until 2 o'clock. So everybody can go and grab something to eat and have a break from the computer screen. So please come back and join us later this afternoon where we'll be focusing on citizen science and monitoring.